Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Sea of Tranquility. I'm your host, Pete Pardo, and in the co-captain's chair, he's here once again, Mr. Mike Portnoy. What's happening, my friend? How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me back, Pete. I had a great time last time, so I'm happy to
Absolutely.
be
I
back.
knew we had to do it again. I think most of our viewers said you guys got to do this again.
Yeah.
So here we are once again. We're talking about classic albums. So Mike and I figured out a neat little discussion point for this episode. We were talking about live albums, right? We talk about live albums a lot on this channel. I love live albums. I love going to live shows. So Mike and I were thinking, well, what about those classic live albums that were originally only released as a single album? And we wished it was a double, right? So what we've done is we've kind of gone through our stacks of things that you see behind us, and we've each pulled out 10 classic live albums that we always wish were doubles. And we'll probably talk about the reasons why they could have been, should have been. We have not compared notes, so I have no idea what Mike has picked, nor he of mine. So I'm going to have Mike kick us off with his first selection here at number 10, I guess.
Well, it's harder than you think, because when you think of classic live albums, they're pretty much all doubles, or some even triples.
Yeah.
But like all my favorites, Kiss Alive, Deep Purple, Made in Japan, Song Remains the Same, UFO, Strangers in the Night. Those are all my favorite live albums of all time. They're all doubles. And then you have Yes Songs was a triple, and Exit Stage Left was a double. So actually finding 10 single live albums is harder than you think, actually. And if you're saying that one of the criteria is that you wish that they were doubles, in some of these cases, now in the CD age, they have been expanded to doubles. Yeah. But I guess the rule here was ones that came out as a single album when it was released.
Yeah.
So I'll kick it off here. I'm going to start with something in the prog universe. And a lot of people date the beginning of prog to King Crimson's and the Court of Crimson King, 69. That's a lot of people consider that the starting point. But I think there was prog was starting to develop, I think, a couple years before that. I mean, certainly Sgt. Pepper could be considered, something that triggered it. But there were two bands in particular that were around 67, 68 that I think were kind of pre-prog bands, mixing together rock and blues and jazz and symphonic stuff. And one was the Moody Blues, with all the mellotrons and everything like that. And then the other was Prokoharum, which their debut album was in 67. Whiter Shade of Pale came out in 67. The follow-up was Shine On Brightly in 68, which was a favorite album of mine. But this is their live album, live in concert with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra. And it's not the classic lineup. At this point, Robin Trower and Matthew Fisher were already gone. But you still have Gary Brooker and B.J. Wilson, who's such an underrated drummer. I always loved his drumming. And actually, the bass player on this, Alan Cartwright, just passed away just this week, coincidentally.
Oh, really? I didn't hear that. Wow.
Yeah, but this was his first album with the band. And there's only 5 songs on here, because all of side 2 is In Hell 'Twas an I, which for me, I consider that the first real prog song. It was the first song that was like 17 minutes long, and that was like 1968. So I always considered that really the first prog song. And actually, out of the 5 songs on this album, Transatlantic has covered 3 of them. So there's a deep connection between Transatlantic and Prokoharum, because we did In Hell 'Twas an I on our first album. We did A Salty Dog as a bonus track for the Whirlwind, and I sang that. That's one of my favorite songs of all time.
It's a great one. Yep.
And then Conquistador was a bonus track for the Kaleidoscope album. So 3 out of these 5 songs we covered. And this version of Conquistador is the one that everybody knows. The studio version from their first album is almost unrecognizable to the version that you always hear on the radio. It's always this version. So there you go. This is 1971 Prokoharum live with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra.
That's a great choice, and I completely forgot about that one. That's really cool. That's why I love doing shows like this, because it's always neat when like the participants pick stuff that the other one completely forgot about, and really good choice. And that was 1971. I'm going to stay on 1971 here, actually. So Johnny Winter and live. So this is basically Johnny Winter and of course Rick Derringer and company, right? So Johnny was releasing all sorts of live albums around this time. He's got another one that came out shortly thereafter with a different lineup. But basically this was recorded live at the Fillmore East in New York City. Actually, this live album contains the full set because I believe they were an opener that night. So this contains the full set that they played. But it's really brief. It's like barely over a half hour long. And if you go back and you look at the set lists that the band had played on that tour when they were headlining various places and festivals, they would play this and a ton more. So, if they really wanted to put out a double live album at the time, not only capturing the Fillmore set, as brief as it was, but other stuff from the tour, they could have easily filled out 2 LPs in this set. I mean, the album itself has got Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, It's My Own Fault, Jumpin' Jack Flash, then the Rock and Roll Medley, which has Great Balls of Fire, Long Tall Sally, and a whole lot of shaking going on. Then Meantown Blues and Johnny Be Good, almost all covers there. But I mean, they also played on this tour, like on dates after this and before it, Tell the Truth, Tobacco Road. They played Frankenstein, of course, from the Edgar Winter Group. Mama Talk to Your Daughter, Mean Mistreater, Mama, Guess I'll Go Away, Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, Prodigal Son, Rollin' and Tumblin', Black Cat Bone, and all sorts of others. So, technically, they could have easily made this a double album. They could have called it like the Fillmore and then some, right? And really kind of fleshed it out, or even, making it 40 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever. But I think this one is blazing. I mean, all sorts of guitar mayhem on here. It's just a really great live album. It's so damn brief though, man. It's like when you get done listening to this, you're like, all right, where's the rest? Because it's like, 35 minutes, 40 minutes tops goes by, and that's it. So this could have easily been a double. I would have loved to have seen it. As a single though, it still kicks ass.
Well, you mentioned Jumping Jack Flash. Gotta have this one.
Yeah.
And this is the Stones, Get Your Eyes Out. And this was recorded at Madison Square Garden. It says on the liner notes, Madison Square Garden, is plural. But this was, I guess, about a week or so before Altamont, the Altamont concert, which is, obviously featured in Gimme Shelter. And I think Gimme Shelter even has footage from some of these shows at the Garden.
Right at the beginning, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, this was once again just 2 sides, 5 songs on each side. The version of Midnight Rambler that closes side 1 is great. What a great live version. But Sympathy for the Devil, Honky Tonk Woman, Jumping Jack Flash, and this was my favorite era. We talked about it last time, but this was my favorite era of the Stones, and I think this was right after Mick Taylor joined the band, I believe. And
yep.
But this is one of those albums that did get expanded into a deluxe edition. So this is the deluxe box that came out a few years ago, and it's got the original 10 songs, but it has 5 more songs. It's got You Gotta Move, and it's got Satisfaction, Under My Thumb, which was whenever I hear Under My Thumb live now, I think of Gimme Shelter. That was the scene when the stabbing took place and everything. But then this also has BB King and Ike and Tina Turner's set. So a great box set deluxe edition of it.
I wonder if that's still available, because I never picked that up, and I probably need to.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good one.
I probably need to. All right. Let's go into the 80s next a little bit. So Saxon, The Eagle Has Landed. Great live album. Again, could have easily been a double. So basically here you've got, most of the Saxon staple songs from the time: Motorcycle Man, 747, Princess of the Night, Strong Arm of the Law, Heavy Metal Thunder, 20,000 Feet, Wheels of Steel, Never Surrender, Fire in the Sky, and Machine Gun. However, and I believe parts of this, if not all of this, was recorded at the Hammersmith Odeon and a few other places in the UK. But I mean, they were also playing in that original concert and others right around that time. The Eagle Has Landed, which was the name of the album. Of course, they didn't include that song on here. Denim and Leather is not on here, and the band Played On is not on here. Hungry Years not on here. Susie Hold On, See the Light Shining. So they could have easily made this a double, and this was for a single live album. This was pretty close to being at capacity, I think. But just a kick-ass live album, one of my favorite kind of new wave of British heavy metal live albums of the time, and kind of like another one that we're going to probably talk about a little later on. Just a kick-ass live album that you just were left wanting more, and you knew there were a couple songs that were not on there that probably should have been on there, but still a great live album. Would have made a perfect double.
Right on. Well, my next one is also from the 80s. This was 84. So yeah, same period. And this is Alcatraz Live Sentence, recorded in Japan at the Sun Plaza in Tokyo. And this, when it came out, I loved this album because I was just blown away by Yngwie. When Alcatraz, actually I first heard Yngwie from the Steeler album, and blew my mind with that. And then Alcatraz came around, and I loved the first Alcatraz album. And then this came out, and I loved this album because it had, first of all, they did a couple of Rainbow songs from the Down to Earth album, Since You've Been Gone and All Night Long. But my favorite thing on this album was Evil Eye, because when this came out, there was no Yngwie instrumental songs yet. So that was the first time you heard Yngwie doing like an instrumental, and it was obviously a precursor to where he was going to go with Rising Force, and he ended up recording a studio version of Evil Eye on the Rising Force album. But yeah, I love this album. I love, the deeper cuts like Hiroshima Mon Amour and Krina Kori, I just loved all those tunes from the first Alcatraz album. And I saw Yngwie's last show with Alcatraz. It was at the, I think it was the Rio Theater in Valley Stream, Long Island. And it was his last show before he left and started doing the Rising Force thing. But yeah, Alcatraz Live Sentence.
If I remember correctly, because I had that on LP, but I don't have it on CD. At least I don't think so. Don't they also do Night Games on there? Which is Graham Bonnet's solo track, which is really good on there. Yeah. And there was a home video of the concert as well. And we used to, when we were at Berkeley in '85, me and John Petrucci and John Mayung, when we just met, we would wear out the VHS of that concert was one that we watched all the time. And there was an Alan Holdsworth live concert from Japan as well. We wore those out, but those were like two concerts that we watched all the time at Berkeley. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, I caught Alcatraz on the tour for No Parole. They opened up for Ted Nugent in Poughkeepsie. And Yngwie was a big deal at that point. I mean, he was like, must see guitar player, the hot guy on the scene. So I think most people in the audience went to see Alcatraz that night.
I firmly still stand by Yngwie. I mean, he gets a raw shake by a lot of people, but I've always said there's been three innovators of the instrument. It was Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen, and I think Yngwie deserves just as much credit as the third as well.
I absolutely agree with you.
Changing the instrument, changing the entire landscape.
Absolutely. I think his biggest issue, he's his own worst enemy, right? So I think, Yngwie, we can go talk a whole episode about him. I mean, I think he is always at his best when he's with a really good singer who helps him with the songwriting. And he hasn't really had that in a while. I think, Yngwie writing all his own songs and singing his own songs, for me anyway, doesn't really work. But you look at some of his greatest albums, and all the best ones are the ones where he had really great singers, Joe Lynn Turner, Mark Bowles, Jeff Scott Soto, Goran Edman, whoever, who, Tim Ripper Owens, who, worked with him to flesh out the songs and had a great voice. And unfortunately, none of those guys ever lasted long in his band. But I absolutely agree. One of the true innovators in the genre. Absolutely.
And another thing about Graham Bonnet, look at the guitar players he played with. He's, with Yngwie, but before that was Richie Blackmore in Rainbow, with Michael Schenker, Steve Vai in Alcatraz. I mean, the list of guitar players that Graham Bonnet's played with is incredible.
Oh, yeah. Chris and Pelletieri, you got Joe Stump, recently. Yeah, it's crazy, right? All right, my next choice. I have a feeling Mike might also have this one in his list here. Got to go with Unleashed in the East, right? I mean, this was the quintessential, at the time, live album that just screamed for more. Jam-packed, and then they've since released this with more of the original set. It still hasn't come out complete, the double album that it should have been. But, most of the staples of the day are on here. But again, no Rock Forever, no Beyond the Realms of Death that they were playing on that tour. They played at that show in Tokyo. Delivering the Goods is not on here. White Heat, Red Hot, Evil Fantasy, Starbreaker, which they actually put on the version that I have, which is Priest in the East. Starbreaker is fantastic. Hellbent for Leather's not on here, not on the original one. Take on the World, but you know, regardless of all the talk about, you know, how much of Halford's vocals were redone, some people say it was all of them, some people say some of them. He will admit, and he told me himself, that you know, he was under the weather and had either the flu or something close to it, so they did go in and redo a bunch of his vocals. But the rest of the band, what you hear is what happened that night for the most part. But it's still a kick-ass live album, one of the best heavy metal live albums of all time, I think. But yeah, this one, 2 LP set back in the day, would have been absolutely clutch, I think.
I agree. It's on my list too. It is, I think, one of the quintessential single live albums. And actually, I remember when it came out, there was a Japanese vinyl that had these bonus tracks, because this is the reissue, which has Rock Forever, Delivering the Goods, Hellbent for Leather, and Starbreaker added to it. But I'm pretty sure I remember, and it was like the hardest thing to find back in the 80s. There was a Japanese version that had those bonus tracks on it. And now since then, it's been put out everywhere else with that. But yeah, this is my favorite era of Priest. I know a lot of people, you know, they love British Steel, but this is right before British Steel, and this covers all of my favorite Priest albums: Sad Wings, Stained Glass, Sin After Sin, and Hellbent for Leather. Yeah. This lineup is great. I love Les Bink's drumming. I mean, and then the track opening with Exciter, and the live version of Sinner is so good, and the Ripper and Diamonds and Rust. I mean, that's a case where the live version is even better than the studio version. I think the Diamonds and Rust live version is the quintessential version of the song. And Tyrant and Victim of Changes. I mean, really, it's just incredible. And I saw them on this tour. I saw them open for Kiss. It was 79. Kiss was on the Dynasty tour, and they were touring off of this. It was, Nassau Coliseum, and it was amazing. It was my first time.
Yeah, they played the Garden and the Coliseum that tour.
Yeah, but yeah, a classic.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd argue that every version of all those songs on that album are the quintessential versions of those songs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely totally. Amazing. All right, I'm going to stick into the 80s. 1981, Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith. You know, again, a lot of songs on the original LP, but we forget most of these Motorhead songs were like 3.5 minutes long, right? So you could pack quite a few of them in. But and a lot of their staples back in the day: Ace of Spades, Metropolis, Iron Horse, We Are the Road Crew, Capricorn Bomber, the title track, you know, whatever. I mean, title track, Motorhead, I always call that a title track. But again, they were playing, you know, Shoot You in the Back on this tour. I think even at some of the shows that these were taken from, Fast and Loose, Fire, Fire, Dance, Jailbait, Too Late, Too Late. All these songs were played on this tour. And I think the 4 shows that everything that these tracks were drawn from. So yeah, easily could have been a double. But again, you know, Motorhead weren't, you know, they weren't Black Sabbath, they weren't Iron Maiden, they weren't one of those top tier bands. So maybe it just made sense for the stature that they were at, that a single live album was good enough. And, you know, this did pretty well for them. And I think it's looked at as one of the greatest live albums of the 80s for a reason, because the performances are spectacular. And this was, you know, getting near the end of that classic lineup there. But yeah, I would have loved this to have been a double. But as a single, it's still killer and no filler.
I got it too. Yeah, I mean, this was the first Motorhead album I heard, actually. It was 1982. I was playing in my first band, Intruder, and our bass player, Eric Barbasso, was a Motorhead fanatic. He had a jean jacket with Motorhead painted on the back, and all he did was listen to Motorhead. So he turned me onto this album. And at first, I never heard anything like Lemmy. So, you know, when it was 1982, and you know, you hadn't really heard anybody sing like that, really. So it took a while to adjust, but I mean, coming out of the gates with Ace of Spades, I love Stay Clean is a favorite. The version of We Are the Road Crew on here, Overkill, you know, like you said, these are all classics. And this is, once again, another album where I think the live versions are the quintessential versions. I mean, I really love every one of these versions better than the studio versions. And this is the classic trio. Rest in peace, all 3 of them now, which is unbelievable. All 3 of them are not with us any longer. But classic Hammersmith Odeon. So many great live albums were done there. I've played them many times and put out some live shows from there as well. But such a legendary venue, and just a classic live album. One of the great early heavy metal live albums.
You ever spend any time with any of the three members of Motorhead, that crew right there? Any stories to tell?
No, I mean, I've met Lemmy a bunch of times and hung with him a bunch of times, but all the usual stories, hanging at the Rainbow and stuff, and crisscrossing on tour and stuff like that. And he was just such a legend. And I'm friends with Mickey D, who's was in the and Phil Campbell as well. They were part of the last lineup, but yeah, this original line. Well, they're not the original lineup, the classic lineup, but yeah, didn't really know Fast Eddie Clarke or Filthy Animal.
Yeah, they opened up for Ozzy Osbourne's Blizzard of Oz on the first tour. That was the first show I ever saw was Motorhead and Ozzy at the Manhattan Civic Center in Poughkeepsie, New York. And I remember I was in like the 8th row, and my buddy and I were right in front of Lemmy. And I just remember how loud it was.
Oh yeah.
He's got the microphone that came up and down, right, with the Rickenbacker, just like doing his thing. And I remember thinking, I've never heard anything this loud and obnoxious and just in your face, raw, right? And then I remember shortly thereafter, I didn't know what to think. I was like, holy cow, this is like the most extreme thing I've ever heard at the time, right? 1981. And I remember going to the record shop not long after and seeing the Overkill album and that cover, right? And I was like, well, you know what? I did see them live. This looks amazing. I'm going to pick it up. And that was it. I became a Motorhead fan from that day.
Yeah, I saw them the year after this. I saw them in '83. That was the first time I saw them live. And it was them and Virgin Steel and the Rods opening. And it was Brian Robertson was the guitar player at that point.
Oh, so another Perfect Day tour. Yeah,
exactly. And like you said, it was the loudest show I'd ever seen. And also it was in my very early days of drinking, and I got really drunk at the show and passed out about halfway through Motorhead's set. Who could fall asleep and pass out
with all that noise going on?
Oh yeah, incredible. But I did.
So, Mike, as a Long Islander, I lived on the island for a bunch of summers in a row in the late 80s. Were you ever like a frequent visitor at Sundance?
Oh, every weekend.
Because pretty much every weekend for like 2 years straight.
Yeah, for me, every weekend it was either Sundance or Lemoore in Brooklyn. And, I pretty much was at both of those places every weekend, between like 83 to 86 or so, or 87, and all the classic shows were at Sundance. I mean, everybody came through Long Island, and I've seen everybody from, Megadeth and Slayer and Metallica, everybody played those either Sundance or Lemoore back then.
Yeah. I bet you if you and I were to compare like old concert ticket stubs, we probably had a ton of shows together.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first shows that we ever played as Dream Theater, even before Dream Theater when we were Majesty, was Sundance. That was pretty much our hometown gig. Whenever we were playing, that's where it always was. We were always at Sundance. And you'd go on at 3 a.m.
Oh yeah.
Goes on at 3 a.m.
Yeah, it's like the first band wouldn't go on till like 10, and there'd always be at least 6 bands, right? And you were never getting home until 5, 6 in the morning because of course you had to go out and eat afterwards, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right?
Yeah, great times, man. It's fun.
It's not like that anymore. That was a scene. That was the '80s scene, and the thrash scene came out, and I used to see my wife's band all the time playing at those places. She was in an all-girl band, Mean Streak, and I used to see them opening for Overkill and Megadeth, and it was a great scene back then.
It was, yeah, good memories. All right, my next choice, I'm going to totally switch gears here. So I'm going to go back to 1970 for a really special album, Elton John, 11/17/70. So recorded in New York City, originally part of just a radio broadcast, right? So Elton, this was actually the early trio, Elton. So you got piano, bass, and drums. Basically, this is a very stripped down version of the larger Elton John band. And basically it was just a little gig in front of lots of, record executives, a small audience out over the airwaves, and they played a 13-song set, I believe, and they wound up releasing it on album as a single, trimmed it way down, obviously, but what a killer performance. And a lot of people talk about this was the performance and the album that really got the momentum going for Elton John, and it's a powerhouse performance. I mean, you would never think like a rock piano trio would put out the kind of energy that is on this album. Bad Side of the Moon. This is all really early stuff. Take Me to the Pilot, which is killer on here. 60 Years On, Honky Tonk Woman, great cover. Burn Down the Mission is great on here. Just it's really, really good stuff. But they played, like I said, all sorts of other stuff. Even like, Country Comfort they left off of here. Your Song they left off of here. So just imagine, like, if they would have made this a double album, this would be probably looked at as his greatest ever live album. He's got another one that I think a lot of people always talk about, but for me, the energy and the excitement surrounding this performance is absolutely magical. So that's my choice here for number 6.
Good pick. There's some good, really cool footage on YouTube of the trio doing like a long, like 15-minute version of like Man Across the Water and stuff. It just really stretching out. There's some great stuff on YouTube from that early era.
It's awesome stuff. Yeah.
So just talking about the New York club scene in the 80s, as we just were, ties perfectly into my next one. This was actually a New York band that I used to go see in the clubs all the time back then. And this album came out, I think, in 84. And this is Billy Sheehan's Talus, the live Speed on Ice album. And this is, did I freeze? There we go. I froze on this end. They were always playing Sundance, The Right Track In, Cheers. This was actually recorded at Lemoore East in Queens, but I also saw them playing at Lemoore, Brooklyn. I used to go see them all the time. I was underage too, but back then the drinking age was 18, and we didn't have photos on the licenses back then. So I used to always sneak into the clubs when I was around 15 or 16. I would go see Talus, I'd go see Twisted Sister, and all the bands that were playing the New York scene. But first time I saw Billy Sheehan play live, just blew my mind. Talking about like Yngwie and Eddie Van Halen and Jimi Hendrix. Well, Billy Sheehan was that kind of player on the bass. Yep. And I'd never, ever seen a bass player like him. And to be sitting, first row at Lemoore, like literally with them sweating on you. And, but this album is the 4-piece lineup, because the early Talus albums, they were a trio. Yep. And they redid the lineup for this album. And Mark Miller is the drummer on this. Mark Miller is one of my favorite drummers from this era, was a huge, huge influence on me. I learned like every drum fill on this album. It's just so incredible. And then Phil Narrow on vocals, and Mitch Perry on guitar. And then later, after Mitch Perry, was Johnny Angel. But yeah, and this whole album, it has a few songs from the earlier albums, like Sink Your Teeth is on here, Lone Rock, King of the World. I think those were on High Speed on Ice. Those were on the High Speed on Ice album. But it also had all these new songs that this was the first place you could hear them, like Crystal Clear, Do You Feel Any Better, Intermounting Flame. All so good. And they never recorded those songs until this past year. Billy and this lineup, different guitar player, but Billy and Mark Miller and Phil Narrow finally got back together last year and finally recorded studio versions of all these great songs. And they were also playing a lot of other songs. I mean, I had their demos from back at this point, and they had at least a whole album or 2 albums worth of great material that never got released. So that's finally coming out soon. But yeah, I also saw them opening for Yngwie at the Beacon Theater in 85.
I was there. I was just going to say that. I was there. That was great.
Which is so funny, because I was there, and it was Talus opening for Rising Force. And now, 30 years later, I'm in a band with Billy Sheehan and Jeff Scott Soto, so it was kind of funny to be in a band. And not only that, the very, very first Dream Theater show ever, we played I'll See the Light Tonight by Yngwie, and we played The Farandole by Talus at the very, very first show, and then ultimately ended up in bands with both
Jeff
Jeff
that
and
was
Billy.
Going to happen, huh?
Yeah, I mean, multiple bands with Billy, between Sons of Apollo and the Winery Dogs and PSMS. I mean, we have now a long history together, and he's one of my favorite people on earth and my favorite people to play with. But yeah, I started as a fan, and this was a favorite of mine.
So don't put that away for a second. It's not one of my picks, but I want to point something out. So I actually bought that album. I think I was a freshman in SUNY New Paltz in 1984. Maybe it was 85. I don't remember exactly when I bought it. But there used to be a record vendor that used to come on campus every couple of months, and he would sell all these import, like metal albums, right? And I actually bought that live album from him. I don't have it anymore. And it had a cutout at the top exactly where you is.
Well, I wonder how many people probably bought this album. They probably sent out more promos to college radio than people bought.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's how I got turned on to them, because a bunch of my friends went to college in Brockport. And Tallis was a Buffalo band. So they were always playing like the Penny Arcade in Rochester and stuff. So I saw them a bunch of times up there as well. They were like the ultimate club band, and they started in the 70s. You know, they hammered it out throughout the 70s and early 80s before Billy got the gig with David Lee Roth.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also I should point out the bass solo on here. Like the Sink Your Teeth album has what I consider Billy's like eruption, the studio bass solo that's on there. But this has a live solo as well, and the title is 7718-3A17, which is Bill Live. And the name of the bass solo on the studio album was, I think it was Sheehan, spelt out backwards with numbers and letters. So pretty clever.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard that live album, I was like, I had no idea who Billy Sheehan was. And I was like, holy cow, this guy is like intense.
And then when he got the gig with David Lee Roth, like him and Steve Vai coming together, it was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Ultimate matchup.
And I mean, he did that like brief stint with UFO too, which didn't really work out, but they played a bunch of live dates and stuff. But yeah, what a great bass player. And he's done so much over his career. All right, let's see. How about 1973? Genesis Live. I mean, quite frankly, this is another one of those live albums, the single. All the songs on here are pretty long. However, it's missing something. It's missing Supper's Ready. And that alone would have made this a double album, and that would have taken up a full side, right? And most folks have heard the original recordings as bootlegs with Supper's Ready. So, you can easily get that nowadays. Yeah, there you go, right? Mm-hmm. It's a great live album, and it's a legendary live album, actually. And it's the only live album from that, era of the band. But, it is missing that one classic song that would have made it a double, I think. But yeah, this is as good as it gets, I think, right? I don't know, you got comments on that, I'm sure.
I agree. I mean, this is number 2 on my list here, but I'll jump it up to talk about it now. Yeah, I mean, it's only 5 songs. This was before Selling England, so it's mainly Trespass, Foxtrot, and we've Trespass, Foxtrot, and
Nursery Crime.
And Nursery Crime, right? That's what I'm missing. Yeah, and then so basically, you have The Knife and Return of the Giant Hogweed from Trespass, but there is you probably have it. They ended up putting out an archive and then a box set, and they put out a Live at the Rainbow CD, which is the perfect companion, because here you have Watcher of the Skies, which is the greatest, Return of the Giant Hogweed, musical box, The Knife, Get 'Em Out by Friday. I mean, all 5 are classics, but yeah, it's missing Supper's Ready. As far as I'm concerned, it's also missing Firth the Fifth, which is an important one too. But if you get this Live at the Rainbow in '73, that came out either on the box set and the archive, it's the perfect companion to this, because that has Supper's Ready. It's got Firth the Fifth. It's got I Know What I Like. So if you take this and put it together with the Live at the Rainbow, that's your double album version of this. But yeah, and this also has the what did they say? What does Peter Gabriel say? An unaccompanied bass pedal solo by Michael Rutherford.
Yeah.
Where else are you going to get that?
Yeah.
But yeah, the stories that Peter Gabriel tells between songs, it's worth it just for that.
Yeah, yeah. And hindsight's 2020, but I think if they were to go back in time, because they literally put out the Selling England album just a couple months after they released this, and then they went immediately on tour, and they added Dancing with the Moonlit Night and all these other songs to the set. They expanded the set. If they would have just waited a couple months, they actually had an easy double live album that they could have released with all of those songs from that album that they were playing live.
And then I mean, it's a double, but Seconds Out is also a great album.
I love Seconds Out.
Yeah, to cover the the later Hackett years with Phil singing, and Bill Bruford was touring with them at that point for some of that period, as well as Chester Thompson. So another great one, but that's a double, so we can't count it here.
Yeah. I actually, in my history of Genesis listening, I actually bought Seconds Out before I heard any of the Gabriel era albums. So I had to kind of get used to Peter singing those songs, those early songs, which I was already used to Phil singing.
Right.
And then, of course, I totally fell in love with Peter Gabriel, and those became my favorite versions. But I love Seconds Out. I think that's a fantastic live album. Really well done. All right. So for me, this is, I mean, you know, mine are not ranked per se, but this for me was always one that could have easily been a double. And I understand why they didn't, because they didn't want to duplicate any songs from this band's previous live album. And I know a lot of the bands from that era, that's kind of why they did what they did. But Deep Purple, Made in Europe, you know, Made in Japan. So this came out in 1975. Well, they were recorded in 75, came out in 76, and you had Made in Japan just a few years before. But basically, this was drawn from a couple of concerts in Paris. So, and also at Graz, and I think on some other Scandinavian show. And this was Blackmore's last couple of shows with the band before he left to form Rainbow. So, and this is most of the set they played on that tour and at these shows. You had Burn, Mistreated, Lady Double Dealer, You Fool No One, and Stormbringer, a lot of long jams in here and whatnot. But they also played The Gypsy, which was another great song off the Stormbringer album, not included here. They obviously also played Smoke on the Water. They also played Space Truckin'. They did a cover of Going Down. They did Highway Star. You can get all of those tracks at the released later on Last Concert in Paris, which I absolutely love. But I still love, you know, they basically took some of the best recordings of these songs from those couple of shows to make this particular album here. I still love it, and I will always go on record saying that I would have rather this band had concentrated more on the songs from those two albums, Burn and Stormbringer, and less on the Mark II era stuff, because quite frankly, Coverdale and Hughes were not great at replicating the Ian Gillan stuff. I never thought so. So I would have rather them drop Space Truckin' and Highway Star. You know, Smoke on the Water, they're not going to get away without playing that, but maybe draw a couple of other tracks from those two albums, I think would have been absolutely perfect. But still, I would have loved to have seen this be a double. I absolutely love this album.
But it's a great companion to Made in Japan because
it doesn't have all that repetition.
And it's the other lineup. It's the Coverdale Hughes lineup. Yeah. So you again, if you put them together, you kind of get
perfect.
Yeah. And Dream Theater covered the entire Made in Japan album many years ago, and Roger Glover actually mixed it for us. But yeah, I mean, that's a great pick right there. And Coverdale and Hughes, that lineup was just so amazing.
Really good. Yeah.
Well, here's another one, kind of still staying in the same era.
Great.
If You Want Blood, You Got It. And this was the only live album with Bon Scott. And this was before Highway to Hell. So really, it's all, you know, all the greatest tunes from pre-Highway to Hell. And once again, another example where the live versions are the best. I mean, this live version of Whole Lotta Rosie, I can't not hear Angus, you know, I can't hear Whole Lotta Rosie without the crowd chant at the beginning. So to me, that's the better live version, the better version of Whole Lotta Rosie's here. Better version of Problem Child, I think. Riff Raff, I mean, you know, it's all the classics. Let There Be Rock, you know, High Voltage. It's all the best early Bon Scott stuff. And you know, from here they went and made Highway to Hell, and then you know, the rest is history. But yeah, this is one of those late 70s. What was I guess this was around 78 or 9 or so. And but yeah, you know, another classic metal live album from this era.
I've talked to so many people who claim that is their favorite live album from the 70s. Can't blame them, right? I mean, it's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good choice. Another one I completely forgot about. I mean, there are a lot of them, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I think we all gravitate towards those doubles, right? Those are the ones we really remember, but I think we all have plenty of favorites that were only singles. It's just trying to remember which ones they were, right? So
yeah, but I mean, Strangers in the Night is probably one of my favorite live albums of all time, and that's a double. We talked about Purple. Made in Japan is one of my favorites of all time. Kiss Alive, but we'll stay with the singles.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to talk about.
You know, Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy is
another one. Yep.
So here, this is I love this one. big time. And again, if you follow the band or you go and investigate a little bit, they played a much longer headline set around this time. Pat Travers Band live, Go For What You Know. This is the classic Pat Travers Band album with Mars Cowling and Tommy Aldridge, and of course Pat Thrall on second guitar. Magical stuff here, and again, a lot of great tracks on here. Hooked on Music, Getting Better, Go All Night, Boom Boom, Out Go the Lights, Stevie, Making Magic, Heat in the Street, Makes No Difference. The best versions of all these songs are right here. However, they played live. Life in London, not on here. They did a cover of Statesboro Blues on that tour, not on here. Hammerhead, which is a killer instrumental, not on here. Rock and Roll Susie's not on here. Need Love. Those are the other songs that they were playing on this tour that could have easily filled this into a double. But man, this is just all killer, no filler. Come in, kick your, just like it says, you know, when the first track on here, now here he is to kick your ass, Pat Travers Band, right? Because that's exactly what they do. And it just does not let up the whole way. It's melodic. There's plenty of really tight soloing, great rhythms. It's funky, it's bluesy. The vocals are outstanding. An absolutely face-melting album.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I got two left. This next one is actually higher up on my list. This isn't my number two, but we bumped up, like Genesis Live was my number two, Unleashed in the East was my three, Motorhead, No Sleep Till Hammersmith was my four, but we already talked about those. So this one is getting talked about second to last, was probably a little higher up on my list. But going back to the prog world, UK's Night After Night. And this was also recorded in Japan. I think this at Sun Plaza in Tokyo, same venue as the Alcatraz album. But this was the live album with Terry Bozzio. I mean, I love both studio albums. I love the first album with Holdsworth and Bruford, and I love Danger Money with Terry. I mean, Terry and Bozzio and Bruford are two of my biggest heroes, but this was a great live album. And this lineup of Eddie Jobson, John Wetton, Terry Bozzio, I mean, what a lineup. You had John coming from, well, he was doing Crimson and the first UK album, and Terry and Eddie Jobson were playing together with Frank Zappa at that time. So I guess when Bruford left the band, Terry came in. But I love this because I love hearing Terry's takes on the Bruford songs. And conversely, there's a great bootleg of the Bruford Holdsworth lineup playing some of the songs that ended up on Danger Money, like The Only Thing She Needs and Caesar Palace Blues. So it's interesting hearing Bruford play Terry's songs, and in this case, you could hear Terry playing Bruford's songs. But this is another album as well that ended up getting expanded. So the original was a single, just two sides, 9 songs. But they put out a box set a few years ago, which had a full expanded full concert from here, as well as a whole bunch of other outtakes and stuff like that. And just what a great prog band that's often forgotten about. Everybody talks about Genesis, Crimson, Yes, Floyd, ELP. Everybody talks about the Big Five or whatever, but you got to count UK in that group as well. And Bruford played with all these bands. But yeah, this is a great prog live album. Such great playing by all three of them: John Wetton, Eddie Jobson, Terry Bozzio. All-star band, amazing album.
I think the only thing that kind of limited their more mass exposures, they just didn't last long enough, right? But I think and I was talking to Martin Popoff about this on one of the shows we did recently, I think the blueprint for what later became Asia was already kind of starting on that second UK album. When you listen to it, there's a little bit, there's more of a feel of accessibility on those songs on that second album when compared to the first album. The first album is much more prog and fusion oriented, but that second album's got a lot of hooks on it, a lot of really cool songs on there that maybe if that lineup had continued, they might have actually been the band that did the thing that Asia did before Asia did it, right? So yeah, great album. And interesting to hear the live album and hearing Jobson actually go and play some of the stuff that Holdsworth was doing and doing it on keyboards or violin or what have you.
Yeah, totally.
Pretty cool. So, all right, my next choice from 1977, Foghat Live. Nice kick-ass boogie album, only 6 tracks, not nearly long enough. It's got, again, we talk about the quintessential versions of some classic songs, and they're definitely from here. Fool for the City, Slow Ride, whenever you heard that on the radio, they generally played the live version here. Honey Hush is on here, Road Fever, I Just Want to Make Love to You, and Home in My Hand, but a really short set. And live, they were doing Driving Wheel all the time. My Babe, Maybelline, they played all the time live. Chateau Lafite, 59 Boogie. So they could have fleshed this out too, but this is another example of one of those classic live albums from the time period where short and sweet, kick your ass, and everybody remembers every song from it. So maybe it was just long enough. I don't know. But Foghat Live is my number 2.
You got a lot of similar, like I picture Pat Travers and Foghat and Johnny Winter and stuff. They're all from that kind of bluesy rock kind of live jam band.
Yeah, I love those live guitar albums, man.
Yeah,
that's totally my thing. And my number 1's totally in that vein as well. So.
Well, my number 1 was very, very easy because to me, this is one of the greatest live albums ever, regardless of single or double or triple. This would be in probably my top 3 of even doubles, but if we're talking singles, there's none better than this. And now a lot of people, modern generation, are going to probably think that this was always a double album because they've put out so many deluxe versions of this. I'll talk about the modern deluxe version in a minute, but this was the version that came out in 70, and this is the version I grew up with when I was a kid. It's a single. Basically, it came with all this kind of press kit stuff like lyrics and contracts and 8x10 photos. And I just remember when I was a kid just looking at this stuff and loving it. But really, it's a pretty sparse track listing. Side 1 is just Young Man Blues, Substitute, Summertime Blues, Shaking All Over. And then side 2 is just 2 songs. You got the live version of My Generation, the 15-minute version, and then the extended version of Magic Bus. Now, one of the things that makes this, to me, one of the greatest live albums of all is, first of all, the raw energy. And we talked a little bit about it when we talked last time. I mean, it just captures the volume. I love the way that Pete's guitar is panned to one side, Entwistle's bass is panned to the other. You could hear Entwistle playing so many lead lines to compensate when Pete's just doing chords, and Keith is just on fire. And this is one of those albums you just crank it up and you can't help but just feel like you're in the arena, feeling the volume, feeling the energy. It was just so loud and aggressive and raw. I love the mix. I also love, and to me, one of the aspects that makes a great live album is when bands jam on stuff and they improvise and they extend stuff. That's why I love Purple's Made in Japan. That's why I love Led Zeppelin's Song Remains the Same. Those are albums where they're stretching, and this is the same. I mean, obviously side 1 was the more commercial, shorter songs, but side 2, that 15-minute version of My Generation, where they're doing all bits from Tommy mixed in there, and then the live version of Magic Bus, which I love the way Cameron Crowe used it in Jerry Maguire. It was really awesome. So it's one of those albums where you can hear the band just really playing together, playing off of each other. I love that they jam and improvise and extend things. And as if that original wasn't great enough, but the reissue is just unbelievable because first of all, you're getting all of Tommy live on the second disc, but then the first disc, you have stuff like they open with Heaven and Hell. Who opens with a song,
unknown, unrecorded song, right?
Unrecorded song with John Entwistle singing the lead, like Roger's just standing there throwing his mic for the first song, and then and then you have the hits like I Can't Explain, but you have stuff like Tattoo from Sellout, which is amazing, and then a quick one while he's away. A quick one's one of my all-time favorite Who songs. So you get a live version of that. It's this. I mean, this double version is the quintessential live album. I mean, maybe number 1 for me of all time. But if we're talking singles, this is the original great single double album.
Yeah, I'd love to comment on that a little bit. So I didn't pick that one because I had a feeling you were going to, and I said I'm going to let Mike have that one, but I do want to talk about it as well because it would have easily topped my list. I think for me, I mean, I was always, back in the day, I was always frustrated that album wasn't longer because I think most folks were like, "Where's the rest of this?" Right? I mean, that is the perfect example of this entire concept of this show is live at Leeds. But I will say another reason why I didn't include it is because personally, I've had that deluxe version that's been out for a long time. And I listen to that still to this day to death. And that is one of the best full package double live albums of all time. And that's the way it should have been released back in the day. But all of those songs on there, or I mean, that is probably, the Isle of Wight is close, but I think Tommy presented the way it is on Live at Leeds, as well as the Isle of Wight, and quite frankly, at Woodstock too, are amazing. And as much as I love Tommy, the studio version, man, those songs live just
absolutely,
a whole other level. But yeah, you're right about the raw power of the Who on that entire tour. If you listen to the Hull live album, which they did, I think the day before, the day after, something like that, is just as amazing. I mean, that band was at their peak on stage at that point in time. Absolutely. And I honestly don't think they ever quite captured that energy on any of the studio albums, as brilliant as most of them are, as they did live in that, from like 1969 to like 74, 75. I mean, they were just like an incredible band.
Yep.
So yeah, I would say that. There's another one that I did, and for the exact same reasons, it's another one I did not include here today that I wanted to, but again, because I've been listening to the expanded version so much, is Jimi Hendrix Band of Gypsy. I mean, it's another perfect example.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They kind of cherry picked a handful of tracks from those couple of nights from that weekend.
And it was all new. It wasn't, there's no tracks from the first 3 albums there. A different band and all different songs. Yeah, that's great choice. Actually, I missed that one. That would have been in my top 10 if I would have thought about it. Actually, great pick.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're right. What they did for Band of Gypsies is they pulled all these tracks that he had never recorded before or released before, when in actuality, he played a lot of classic Hendrix stuff at those shows that they could have easily put out a double live album, and they chose not to. It's almost like, here's the new Jimi Hendrix album, Band of Gypsies, that's the group, and here's all their new songs.
Right.
There's no, there's no anything else. There's no Purple Haze, there's no Fire, there's no Manic Depression, none of that kind of stuff. Here's all the new stuff. But in actuality, they played all of that entire weekend. So yeah, I chose not to pick that one because I have been, they've released so many expanded versions of the, the Fillmore weekend and what have you. So I decided I was going to leave that off. But that and Live at Leeds are like poster children for this entire topic. But that's not my number one choice. My number one choice has been one of my favorite live albums since the day I bought it in 78 or something like that, a long time ago. And it's, and speaking of Hendrix, he's kind of in that same vein. He's been one of my favorite players of all time. I'm talking about Robin Trower live. That's it right there. Okay, this is a double here. And this was recorded, released in 1975, recorded in Stockholm, Sweden, at the concert hall there. Another one of those originally just made for radio broadcast. All right, so he played a full headline set. They only released part of it, released it on a single album, which is kind of puzzling because Robin was pretty big at the time. Bridge of Sighs was out a couple of years before, did big business. For Earth Below, followed that up, did pretty big business. So they really could have kind of capitalized on his popularity and released a double album, but this still sold really, really well, but it's missing. Bridge of Sighs is inexplicably not on here, which is the biggest song he ever had. Day of the Eagle, which was also from the same album and opened up every single concert he played at that time, was left off. Fine Day was not included. Fool and Me was not included. For Earth Below, the title track to the album they were touring for, not included. Confess at Midnight, not included. And Twice Removed from Yesterday, not included. They played all of those songs in the original concert as well as throughout that tour, but they basically just released the single. In my mind, the single is absolutely amazing. There's no weak track on. The performances are spectacular, but I mean, from day one, again, around this time period, we're buying all these double albums. You mentioned, Made in Japan and Song Remains the Same and all these other doubles. And then you get some of these ones that we're talking about. You're like, well, how come these weren't never double albums? Not like any of these are tiny bands, right? Not popular bands. So interesting why they didn't, I don't know. But so that's my number one choice.
We came full circle because I started with Prokoharum, which was a band that he was in the late 60s and early 70s. So we came full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. You got any honorable mentions?
I don't, because there's I thought about like Iron Maiden, Made in Japan, but that's like more of an EP. I don't have many honorable mentions, honestly, because it was hard to find 10. And, between my 10 and we had a couple that crossed over, we came up with a good 15 or 16 here.
Yes.
I don't know if there's many more beyond that. I mean,
I don't think so. I mean,
it's hard to think of any.
Yeah, I have a couple others that are probably not as notable. I mean, you mentioned a couple that I completely forgot about, but Blue Oyster Cult's Some Enchanted Evening was one that I jotted down. And again, they released the deluxe edition later on, which kind of filled out the rest of that, which turns it into a double. Alice Cooper, The Alice Cooper Show is another one, which again, inexplicably, I mean, Alice was huge at the time and they released a single live album, right? They could have put so much more on it. And another one, kind of more of like a lesser known band, but a band I really love from Canada, Max Webster, Live Magnetic Air would have been a really nice double album. But that's really all I could find. I think we got most of the really, really good ones.
The very first live album I ever put out was a single. This was a single. Yeah, you know, after this, I think every other live album I've done since this were doubles, triples, quadruples, but this was my first one, and it was a single.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man, but this was fun. I love talking about live albums. We did a last year, Mike. We did a live album war contest type of thing. So it ran like 4 or 5 months. And what I did was I put together like a list of like 100 and something classic live albums, doubles, singles, quadruples, whatever. And we did polls on the channel and on Facebook, and we pitted 2 of them up against each other each and every day.
Wow.
And then we would, I think, I don't even remember how long we let the poll go for. And then we'd stop the poll, we count the votes, and the winner would go on to the next round. And we did this for like months till we crowned a winner out of all of them. And Strangers of the Night by UFO won.
Yeah.
In fact,
hard to argue with that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it beat Made in Japan. I think those two made it all the way to the finals.
Made in Japan is an EP. I mean, I think the quintessential.
Deep Purple. I mean, Deep Purple Made in Japan.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because Maiden's Live After Death to me is that's their greatest live album. And this is obviously Cheap Trick, Budokan. There's Frampton Comes Alive.
Kiss Alive made it pretty far. Yeah.
Kiss Alive 1 and 2. I mean, even 2. Well, 2 was only kind of a 1.5 live albums, but I mean, it's so many great ones.
Yeah, and both of those ones from Rush, the early Rush ones. I mean, there's a lot of classic ones.
Yeah, I Exit Stage Left is my favorite between that and All the World's a Stage, because to me, my favorite Rush era is Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, Permanent Waves, Moving Pictures. So Exit Stage Left, you're getting all that there. But there's so many great ones. But it's amazing how many bands don't have. There's no quintessential live Crimson album. I mean, they did have the USA album. Actually, that was a single, I believe. Actually,
yeah, I thought about both USA and Earthbound because they both qualify, but neither one of them are, I think, representative of the greatness of that band. Unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
Although you could go to, I don't know if you ever heard I think it's called The Great Deceiver. You ever get The Great Deceiver?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's probably
Well, they've put out so many great box sets since then of just everything and the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of who else. I mean, I love Jethro Tull's Bursting Out. That was a great one, but that was a double.
Wings Over America is one of my favorites.
You took the words out of my mouth, like they were literally leaving my lips as you said that. Yeah, I saw that tour actually. That was amazing.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I saw 76. I was 9 years old and I saw that tour. Yeah, Nassau Coliseum.
Awesome. Did your parents take you?
Yeah, it was amazing. I saw George Harrison in 74 when I guess I was 7 for that. But yeah, those were the days.
Yeah, my folks wouldn't let me start going to concerts till I was like 15. Although my father had agreed in 79 to take me to go see Kiss at the Garden on the Dynasty tour. But he waited forever to go get tickets at J&R Music World in the city. And by the time he went, they were already sold out. And I was crushed. I was like, oh, he didn't want to go. He didn't want to take me, but he's like, all right, I'll take you. And I was devastated when he came back from work because he worked in the city, he commuted to New York City every day. And he came back, he's like, yeah, I tried to get tickets, but they were already sold out. And I was like, oh man, like, why did you wait? Why didn't you go the day I told you? But what are you going to do?
I saw Kiss. Well, the first time I saw them was on the Love Gun tour. Well, it was actually more the Alive 2 tour. It was right after Alive 2 came out, and they played 3 nights at the Garden in December of 77. Life altering for me.
Yeah. Now, did you go to the Garden more than the Coliseum, or did you kind of do both?
No, I more the Coliseum because I was Long Island, so Coliseum was easier and closer to me. but not everybody came to the Coliseum. So it was either the Garden or the Coliseum, or Radio City, or the Beacon Theater, or club shows like we were talking about earlier, Lemoore or Sundance. So
I mean, those days, the bigger bands would play on the same tour, maybe not always around the same time frame. They would wait till different legs of the tour, but they would come in, they play the Garden, they play Brendan Byrne Arena at the Met, and they play the Coliseum. Yeah. It's like that never happens anymore.
Yeah,
like you pick one date within the area, and then that's it.
And there's a lot of bands that did that I would go to all three. I remember seeing Ozzy and Metallica at all three. I think I remember seeing Roger Waters at multiple venues, like within a week. Yeah, so I mean, that was one of the great things back then of concerts in the 70s and 80s and even early 90s. It was just really, really magical. It's hard, I mean, I guess it's generational, but I guess for us it's nostalgic. And that's what made it so great.
Yeah, I often look back. I mean, I have a binder that's got all my old ticket stubs, and every now and then I look through that just to kind of get the memory banks going again, to see all the great stuff that I witnessed over the years. And it's just sometimes you want to transplant yourself back in time and to be able to kind of relive that all over again. You just went to a show, you drank up a storm beforehand and just like experienced it and totally got into it. Nobody was sitting there on cell phones all night long. Everybody went there and focused on the music and the bands. So it's really different now.
Yeah, absolutely. It is.
So, well, Mike, thanks once again for coming on the show. I could sit and talk music with you all night. It's like we're both New Yorkers. We grew up in the same era with a lot of the same stuff, and definitely feel a nice connection with you on a musical sense, which is cool. So,
well, thank you for having me again. It's a blast, and I'm around to do more. So, as long as we're in quarantine, we could do some more down the road. So, thanks for having me again.
Pleasure having you. Any news on your front, music-wise, you want to talk to the folks about?
No, nothing news. I'm hard at work on the Neil Morse Band album right now. I mentioned that last time. So working on that now. It's starting to get mixed now, and it's really something else, really amazing, and real excited about it. And then the LTE album is delayed 3 weeks. It actually got pushed to April 16th because of a manufacturing issue. But in any case, that's coming out next month. We'll have a new video and single for that coming out in a couple of weeks as well. But other than that, just kind of waiting to get on the road again so I could do more live albums myself.
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So cool. Well, we're anticipating the LTE album in a big way. So I hope to, once I kind of start listening to that and digest it, definitely going to review it here on the channel. Would love to have you come on and talk about it if you want. But otherwise, we'll come up with some other topics for you and I to sit here and chat music for a bit. So thanks everybody for watching. I am Pete Pardo. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're on here on YouTube all the damn time. For Mike Portnoy, good night, everybody. See you tomorrow.